issues, but we're going to start our presentation now. The reason we're having this event is because we felt that Occupy Wall Street was one of the fastest growing movements of our generation, and we felt that we had to research it and present to you guys to give you a little background on the movement. So, Occupy Wall Street. Who here knows what Occupy Wall Street is? You back there, what's Occupy Wall Street in your own words?
What?
What's Occupy Wall Street in your own words?
It's people protesting, but the current market, they're not happy with the fact that the giant corporations are getting all the money and that the government is helping them.
So that's a pretty general idea of the movement, but not many people know the history behind the movement. So in 2008, the economy crashed, trillions of dollars were wiped out in equity, and hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs, and those that caused it, they were bailed out. In 2011, July 13, a popular Canadian magazine called Adbusters decided to call for a peaceful movement in the Wall Street area for people to protest against the unfair treatment of bankers. August 23rd, many organizations decided to show their support for the movement. Even a popular hacktivist group called Anonymous called for their supporters to go to the area and show their support. September 3rd, a New York Times article was written that talked about how the majority of the productivity gains had gone to the top 50%. During this time, a lot of articles were written about Occupy Wall Street. September 17th was when the Occupy Wall Street movement officially started, and there were over 1,000 people in attendance. On October 1st, the Occupy Wall Street movement had a march, which was one of the largest marches they ever had. And this was important because, as Pay students, we saw this march firsthand, because they crossed right over the Brooklyn Bridge. On November 15th, the NYPD infiltrated Zuccotti Park, and they told the protesters that they had to leave. The protesters responded saying, we'll clean the park ourselves. So this led to several journalists and protesters being arrested that day, and that's when the Occupy protesters were officially banned from the park. So back in 2012, January 10th, the barricades were removed and all the protesters returned. And even though their presence there isn't as high as it was last year, there are many Occupy movements opening up in the different boroughs, states, and even around the world. So now that we have a little understanding of the history behind the movement, I'm now going to pass it off to Prachi, who's going to talk about the meaning of the movement.
Thank you, Josh. So now you all know about the timeline of the movement. So what is Occupy Wall Street? Occupy Wall Street stands for a struggle between the 1% and the 99%. It is actually the income gap between rich and poor. Now, everybody knows about what is Occupy movement. Now I'm going to tell you more about history and who created the movement. Was it bankers, was it government, or was it us? So in 2008, everybody knows the financial crisis was because of the subprime lending. So subprime lending was due to the banks, like they gave us loan to the creditors who couldn't even afford the money. So now these people started to default and there was a financial crunch in the system. So now what happened? The government has to come and intervene into the issue. So what they did, they intervened through two methods, by monetary policies, which was because they lowered the interest rate and then they lowered the legal reserve, which was held by bank. The other thing they did was a stimulus package, which everybody knows about by now. It was so in the news. So the stimulus package, what they thought was this would help us to create more jobs, and then people will through the lending process can go on smoothly and money can go into the market. But that didn't happen because of the uncertainties and the confidence in the economy. That certainly didn't happen, and the financial banks or financial institution went into a collapse mode. They were posting losses, so they had to reduce the workforce. So now that led to the highest rate of unemployment in 2008 after Great Depression. So what happened now? That these people thought that the political decisions are influenced by the one person. The anger and the hatred was because of the bankers, because they were able to get away with all the mess they created without even getting penalized. So that was a little bit about the history and the timeline. now we want to tell you about the facts between 1% and 99%, and Ian gonna talk about more about this.
Thank you, Paji. Out of everybody here, what do you think you need to make in a year to be considered 1%? Does anybody know here? Kevin?
250,000.
250,000? How about you?
Around like 200,000.
200,000? Anybody else? No, millions or billions? Okay. Well, everybody thinks, well, most people we interviewed, they think that to be a part of the 1%, you need to make an annual income of over $1 million or a couple $1 billion, which is wrong. The annual income to be a part of the 1% is only $380,000. Not $1 million, not $1 billion. $380,000. That's annual income 1 year. Now, everybody knows for 1% to make be a part of that bracket, you make $380,000 a year. Well, let's see what they do. Oops. Let's see what they do. Everybody thinks that 1% is classified by people in the finance industry, financial executives, managers, portfolio managers, hedge funds. But let's see what they really are. You see the first one is 31%. That is executives, managers, and supervisors, and this is non-finance. So that's in non-financial firms. The second one is medical. So those are doctors, surgeons. Then we have the real financial professions, which is 13.9 over here. And we see there's lawyers, there's computer technical, there's networking, networking or deceased, there's skilled sales, and also we're not included on this chart. There's also artists, there's also teachers, there's also other occupations that you don't think will be a part of the 1%.
Technical difficulty.
Okay, now let's talk politics. Most people, even some of you guys, may believe that the 1% consists of only Republicans. That's not true. 26% are Democrats, 33% are Republicans, and 41 are independents. This tells us that this is not a political battle. This tells us that the 1% will only side with the political party that best satisfies their needs.
Does education affect the 1%? Statistics show that the greatest difference between the 1% and the 99% is education. Out of the 1%, 72% have a college degree. Out of the 99%, 31% has a college degree. This does not mean that if you go to college, you're guaranteed wealth. But as you see, it does improve your chances, so study. Private wealth. Out of the 1% out of the households in America, 35% own, the top 1% of households in America own 35% of the private wealth in America. This means that 65%, the 99% own 65% of all of the wealth in America. This shows that there is a great disparity in the country where 3 million people own 35% of all of the wealth in the country, and 303 million people only have 65% of all of the wealth in the nation. And let's talk investments. The top 1% owns 51% of the country's bonds, stocks, and financial investments, which means that the 99% has 49%. And you would think, oh, it's 50-50, but in the 99%, there's a big disparity. The lowest 50% out of the 99% only own 0.5% of all of the financial investments. And that was all for our presentation, and now Arun will introduce